If you're all set, Marty, maybe we can do a roll call, even though it's not officially 6:30 yet.
It's going to be any minute.
Right.
You need to go ahead and read off.
I think so. Yes, please.
Chairman Pritchard.
Here.
Vice Chairman Langston.
Here.
Go ahead and call to order.
I will officially call the meeting to order for the December meeting of the Morrisville Planning and Zoning Board. Please do the roll call. Marty.
Chairman Pritchard.
Here.
Vice Chairman Langston.
Here.
Member Acharya.
Yep.
Member Sack.
Here.
Member Toterai.
Here.
Member Michael.
Here.
And Member Roebuck. Here. We have a quorum, sir.
Thank you, Marty. And we have a full meeting of all full members, so we won't be calling on any alternate members to vote this evening. First item is to adopt the agenda. Any changes from your side, Michelle?
No, Chairman, there are not.
If there are none from the board, I suggest we go straight to number 3, which is approval of minutes from November. Any changes or corrections to the minutes from November? Hearing none, I'd entertain a motion to approve the November minutes.
Second.
Well, we'll make you the primary there. Ken, do I have a second for that?
A second, Tim.
The mover of the motion was Ken Sack. Second was Vice Chairperson Langston. Would you please do the roll call vote?
Member Acharya. Member Acharya.
Yes.
Member Sack. Member Sack.
Mike.
Member Toterai.
Aye.
Vice Chair Langston.
Aye.
Chairman Pritchard.
Aye.
The motion to approve the minutes approved unanimously.
Thank you, Marty. Do we have any presentations this evening?
No.
I don't think so, but I do believe we have some public comment.
Yes, we do.
Should these come now or during the land use plan comments?
I think it's fine to do now. It's the next item.
We do have several comments tonight.
Okay. And that they're specifically about item 6 then,
Yes, yes.
or 8.
The first one is from John Holmes with Hobby Properties, 515 North Blount Street, Raleigh, North Carolina. The owners of Cedar Fort Business Park, LLC, support the land use plan changes to Business Activity Center in the McCrimmon Parkway sub-area with the condition that the airport overlay amendment is included with this change. The change from industrial management zoning to BAC prohibits approximately 50 potential uses currently permitted. The move to BAC with the addition of the airport overlay provides the landowners with a better understanding of the land uses available to them. Without the airport overlay amendments, the landowners have no better understanding of the land uses than they've had over the past 2 years. Okay. Number 2 is from Richard Horn. He's the Chief Executive Officer at Strategic Capital Partners. Here's his comment. We are owners of the land at 741 Slater Road and have been the developers of 4540 Phase 1 and 2. As Morrisville considers its future land use plan for this site, we ask that the staff and town council consider high-density multifamily as an appropriate use for this parcel. There is high demand for multifamily housing around 4540 Perimeter Park and Imperial Center. Our location has several existing and planned multifamily projects in close proximity and, close proximity, and a multifamily use on our land would not impose any inconveniences to Morrisville residents, residential neighborhoods, or impose a burden on town resources. We are simply asking for the flexibility to consider multifamily on our land in addition to office, given the strong demand drivers and the fact that we are adjacent to existing and proposed multifamily projects as well. Thank you for your consideration. Now we have one from John Reynolds. He lives at 218 Church Street in Morrisville. The land use plan does not take into account residents' concerns over overcrowded and capped schools and the need to preserve green spaces. In particular, the proposed town center portion of the plan does not adhere to the plan's stated goal to help with the transition from conventional suburban development to Morrisville's historic core, as stated on page 47. We live in historic Crossroads Village, and the plan shows apartments and a large road directly intruding into that space, taking away from the character and historic preservation efforts of the homes in the district. Please consider amending the land use plan to ensure the land facing the historic district is an attractive and appropriate use of the space. Green space would be a much better transition to Morrisville's historic core than a road and apartments. Let's see. Rob Griffin, 4901 Glen Forest Drive, Raleigh. On behalf of the owners of Morrisville Properties, LLC, we support the land use plan change to BAC in the McCrimmon Parkway sub-area, provided the airport overlay amendment is going to occur. The change from current industrial management zoning to BAC represents a loss of approximately 50 potential uses permitted by right. However, BAC would provide for multifamily development, whereas IM does not. Accepting the shift from BAC without the guarantee that the airport overlay will be amended leaves the landowners with no clear path forward than the limbo they've been in for the last 2 years. Please consider making the two items, the land use plan and the overlay amendment, concurrent items so that the landowners in the area will know for certain what uses they can expect to rely on. We would also urge the town not to make vertical, mixed use, or structured parking a requirement of any type of development. Both of these elements should be market driven. Ground floor retail in a mixed use building is reliant on foot traffic. Between the lack of housing along the McCrimmon corridor, as well as the risk of housing being precluded by the airport overlay, this requirement could end up being costly in vacant portions of new buildings. Structured parking can cost up to 3 times the amount of a surface parking space. For that reason, it becomes a necessity when trying to increase density on a small site. To require it in an area where the scarcity of land doesn't demand it layers on excessive and unnecessary added costs to development. Rob Griffin, Associate Director of Development and Land. All right. This is from Rick Adams with Adams Financial Analysis in Durham. As an owner in Morrisville Properties, LLC, I would like to convey my support for the land use plan change to the Business Activity Center in the McCrimmon Parkway sub-area, provided the airport overlay amendment is to occur. Even though the management zoning to BAC represents a loss of approximately 50 permitted uses, currently BAC would provide for multifamily development, whereas IM does not. Accepting the shift to BAC without the guarantee that the airport overlay will be amended leaves landowners with no clear path forward than the limbo they have been in for 2 years. Please consider making the land use plan and overlay amendment concurrent. On one more issue, I would like to urge you not to require vertical mixed use and structured parking in the McCrimmon sub-area. If the market bears it, a developer will consider either or both. However, making them a requirement could create an unrealistic financial burden that prevents projects from ever getting off the ground. Okay. Ed White, he's the owner of Marshall Properties, LLC. I am a long-term landowner and developer, Town Hall Commons in Morrisville. I worked with the town on a public-private partnership to build Town Hall Drive by co-funding this development as well as subsidizing the school site for Cedar Fork Elementary. I am also one of the owners of land within the McCrimmon Parkway Extension area with land held under Morrisville Properties LLC and the Cedar Fork development. In order to get the McCrimmon Parkway Extension built between Highway 54 and Evans Road, I worked closely with the town and the landowners for an agreement to contribute land for this extension. This land was valued at $5 million and was very significant in order to get the McCrimmon Parkway Extension funded and built. The proposed change to the land use plan impacting this land in the McCrimmon Parkway Extension area could have a very negative impact on the value of this land to the long-term owners as well as to the tax base for the town of Morrisville. I do support the land use plan change to business activity center as long as the airport overlay amendment happens at the same time. Otherwise, the change from the current industrial management zoning to BAC severely limits the potential uses of the property. Unless multifamily residential is available, you essentially remove the market for retail from these properties. I also recommend against requiring vertical mixed use and structured parking in the area. This would put a very large financial burden on all projects, making them unfeasible for development or turn into major delays and expense to seek variances from these requirements. These requirements should be left for developers who see the need based on market density and costs. Okay. This is from RDU Airport Authority. Members of the Planning and Zoning Board, while the Raleigh-Durham Airport Authority appreciates the town's need to update its land use plan and prepare for continued growth in the community, it expressly opposes the draft plan's modifications of the existing airport overlay district. The AOD prevents communities surrounding RDU from exposing residents to high levels of noise due to aircraft overflight. It also protects RDU from residential encroachment, potential noise-related litigation, and negative public sentiment. Raleigh-Durham International Airport is an economic driver for the region, supporting 86,000 regional jobs and generating $12.6 million in annual economic activity. Prior to the global health pandemic, RDU had 6 years of consecutive growth and served a record of 4.2 million passengers in 2019. COVID-19 had a devastating impact on RDU and the aviation industry as a whole, but the strength of the local economy and the importance of global connectivity means RDU will rebound and eventually resume its growth trajectory. In the future, more aircraft will enter the airspace surrounding RDU as the community and airport grow, meaning greater noise exposure to communities underneath the runway flight paths. Airport overlay districts were established in the early 1990s to prohibit residential and other noise-sensitive development in the most noise-impacted areas close to RDU. Over the last 30 years, the land use and zoning protections in the AOD have been remarkably successful. The recommended change to the AOD reflected in the draft plan are the result of noise contours produced by the authority in 2015 as part of our Vision 2040 process. These noise contours are at their lowest. It is important to understand that these noise contours are elastic. They can shrink and grow over time based on the number of aircraft operations, aircraft size, and airspace efficiency. The land use plan should take into consideration the current noise contours, actual single event noise, and the concentrated level of daily aircraft overflight activity, arrivals, and departures that will surely be disruptive to future residents. To only rely on noise contours produced in 2015 will make a long-term policy decision, while ignoring these other factors is simply not good planning. The proposed amendment to Morrisville's land use plan would signal a shift in more than 30 years of thoughtful and collaborative planning. It would alter the airport overlay district and remove protections in high-noise areas with significant concentrated overflight activity where residential development has been prohibited for decades. As the region continues to grow, increased activity from more flights and larger aircraft will create the potential for more noise in the AOD. Authority staff participated on Morrisville's Technical Advisory Committee to educate staff and their consultants on airport land use concerns and discourage the town from changing zoning regulations within the AOD. Our message for many years has been consistent and clear: do not change the AOD. The draft land use plan also recommends the development of workforce and affordable housing within the AOD. The authority adamantly opposes any type of residential development within the AOD, whether it is workforce or affordable housing, single or multifamily, because, as stated earlier, it will expose RDU and the town to negative public sentiment and potential litigation from future residents. RDU was sued over noise associated with aircraft overflights in the 1990s, which was the major reason why the AOD was established. There are plenty of examples recently where airports face significant potential liability from noise-related lawsuits. The city of Chicago was a recent defendant in a lawsuit over noise from Chicago O'Hare International Airport, where the plaintiff sought millions in damages. The lawsuit was dismissed after years of litigation and millions of dollars in litigation costs. We ask that you reject the draft land use plan in its current form, preserve the airport overlay district, and consider one of the many land use alternatives already permissible in these high noise areas. If you elect to defer any decision on the draft land use plan, we certainly welcome the opportunity to educate the Planning and Zoning Board on all the issues described in this letter. And the letter is from William C. Sandifer of the Airport Authority. Okay, let's see. We did get one after 3, which is from Matthew Stevens with Stevens Enterprises, and he supports the currently proposed land use plan amendment. His family owns 120 acres within McCrimmon Small Area Plan since 1997. I am very excited to finally see this plan to come to fruition. We donated property for the construction of the McCrimmon Parkway extension, and that summarizes what his comments were.
Thank you, Marty. So we had a total of 8 comments.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I think we have kind of moved into item 8, which is the land use plan. And as a sort of an overview, I know that the council has reviewed and worked on this plan in 4 or 5 workshops since we, the Planning and Zoning Board, last formally reviewed it, I believe. And so our kind of mandate for this evening is to look at the changes since the last presentation, particularly the action matrix and the implementation of the plan. However, we are an independent advisory board, so if members feel that we need to go back over some of these items, then I think it would be appropriate to consider those, but only if we felt very strongly. I've not seen a council or a set of commissioners go through anything in more detail, I think, except perhaps the budget, than we saw over the last few months. And Brad has survived that and would be witness to that. So I feel it's almost like our parents have taken charge of this, and it would be extraordinary for us to make any major changes at this stage. But if anybody feels that we need to, then we should speak up. With that, I think I'm going to ask Michelle and perhaps Brad to give us an overview and perhaps tell us what you're expecting from us this evening.
Sure. So we were going to start with just a general overview of the final draft plan. We won't go page by page like we did last time. This is going to be more of a section by section breakdown. Where before we even do that, we'll probably dive into just a little bit of background for folks listening, just so they're more acquainted with where we started and how far we've come. And then at the end, we're going to show you some new material. In particular, you mentioned earlier the action matrix, which is going to have a lot of implementation items in that. I think there's 40 total implementation items. We can go through each and every one of those, or we can just go through the ones you all have questions about. I'm happy to do either one. Nick Davis is also, with House Levine, is also on the call, and he can certainly chime in if we have any questions for him. And then finally, we have a revisions list, and these are all the significant changes that have been made since the last time you've seen this draft. As Chairperson Pritchard mentioned, we did 5 work sessions with council since you all seen this. In fact, one of those was a mini weekend retreat. So we did a deep dive into this plan. And a lot of those revisions that you'll see were a result of those work sessions. So thank you for teeing that up. And tonight, of course, you know, as you were saying earlier, unless there's any major changes you all want to recommend, we are looking for a recommendation of approval of this resolution adopting the Morrisville Land Use Plan. I believe you could also recommend approval with some suggested changes if there's some things that you feel strongly about as well. That is certainly an option. So just wanted to set the stage for you, and I think we can start, unless there's any comments or questions, we can start with the kind of general plan overview, if you'd like.
Well, Brad, I'm going to suggest that we as members hold our questions really until towards the end. So if you have a comment as Brad goes through a particular section, maybe we'll pause after each section.
Yeah, we can. Yeah, certainly.
I think that would be the best way of handling questions.
Let's do that.
So thank you, Brad. Go ahead.
All right, great. So, and I'm going to have this real small mic in front of me, so I'm going to try to lean down. And if you can't hear me, just please interrupt me and let me know, and I'll speak louder. So just a little bit of background about the land use plan, and I know many of you heard this already on the board, but for those at home who are listening in, land use plans are really sort of a blueprint for future growth and development in the community. And so they're really a book of recommendations that are non-binding guidelines, more or less, but they are important because they set the foundation for a lot of our development regulations and land use policies. For instance, our Unified Development Ordinance, which is our development regulation book, that's a lot of the policies in there are based off of what was adopted in the 2009 land use plan. And so the 2009 land use plan is what we've been operating under up until this moment. There were also 3 supplemental plans adopted with that plan. There was the Town Center Plan 2007, the McCrimmon Development Guide, McCrimmon Extension Development Guide in 2012, and also the McCrimmon Transit Small Area Plan in 2013. And those sort of helped beefed up the general, more community-wide 2009 Morrisville Land Use Plan. Again, many of those recommendations from all of those plans in the 2009 Land Use Plan were eventually codified. I believe it was 2014 when we officially adopted our Morrisville UDO. And a lot's changed since 2009, obviously. We've grown exponentially, and so in 2017, our council felt it was time to update our land use plan, and so that is what started this whole process. And so I guess the official kickoff date for our land use plan update was in March 2018, quite a while ago. The original scope, we were looking at maybe a year and a half, 2 years tops for this plan to go through the drafting process and be adopted. Obviously, that didn't happen. The original scope was expanded to do a lot of extra analysis, and we also had a lot of new opportunities for input. And of course, COVID and the delay of public engagement opportunities sort of played a factor in that as well. But at the end of the day, it's a good thing. We actually got a lot of good work, extra work done for this plan. I think it really is more robust than we originally envisioned, and it's turned out to have a lot of great analysis and graphics and good considerations, more so than we originally had in our scope. So the updated plan, even though it looks at the entirety of Morrisville, the real focus that we took in terms of deeper analysis was with the sub-areas, these 3 sub-areas. These are areas that are sort of are underdeveloped or undeveloped areas, the last ones in Morrisville, more or less, and are the last large areas. And they really needed an extra layer of analysis. They're very critical to the future of the town, and so we wanted to make sure that we spent a lot of time looking at these, that our consultants had enough time and information to make recommendations for these areas, and you'll see some of those here in a minute. The updated plan, this is something we may not have clarified in the past, but the intention of this plan was to fold all of those other plans I mentioned, the Town Center Plan, Crimmon Extension, Development Guide Plan, the Crimmon Transit Small Area Plan, and the 2009 Land Use Plan, all into one document. So it would more or less supplant and replace, but replace those 4 plans. The reasoning for that originally was that there was some fear that if we had multiple documents with conflicting information about the same specific area, it would create a lot of confusion in the community. So we wanted to sort of consolidate that into one document. Not to say that there isn't a lot of great information in those plans. I've worked on a couple of those plans, so but we can certainly maybe have them in a repository or reference in some capacity, but they are, in terms of where we want folks to veer towards or reference in general, we're really looking for them to go to this new updated plan. I should say the town is put public engagement at the forefront of this process. We have made several rounds, or I guess 2 or 3 rounds of public engagement. Our 3rd round was sort of cut short by the COVID virus. We were planning to go around town and do another one of our in-person public engagement blitzes like we did the first go-around, but of course we had to shift gears. We were able to switch to a more digital, contactless, socially distanced outreach strategy. We did also do some live Q&A sessions, so we adapted to the situation. I thought we got a lot of good input in that 3rd round as well. And so this is the final product here. This is the actual land use plan, the final draft here. And now I'm just going to kind of quickly breeze through these sections, and as was mentioned earlier, I'm going to pause after each section to see if there's any questions. So section 1, introduction, very short. It's really just to kind of set the tone of the document, the purpose of the land use plan, what the plan tries to accomplish, and how it can be utilized. We do talk about this a little more at the very end of the plan when we get to the implementation section and how you all can take this and utilize it effectively. We also outline the general phases that this project sort of boils down to. A lot of these phases kind of overlapped, but we of course did the initial outreach and input gathering at the beginning of this project. It was sort of a major public input blitz where we went out into the community to special events and held meetings and went to HOAs and advisory boards and sort of gained feedback that way. House Levine did a existing conditions analysis to sort of take a snapshot of our community, where we were at that moment. I think it was 2018 when they did that, in terms of demographics, land uses, things like that. Then we focused on kind of an overall community vision, and we had some associated goals with that. We actually had a special work session with town council to help craft that, and that is also in the plan coming up here. The sub-area plans were those 3 specific areas. So we kind of started community-wide, and we go down to the more zoomed-in level, to the sub-areas to get more detailed analysis done for those 3 opportunity zones. We then pull back out and do community-wide plans and policies for the town as a whole. And so then we kind of wrapped all that up and put it into a plan document, which you all are looking at tonight. Any questions about that? Okay. So section 2, so this is the sort of the community context snapshot of where Morrisville was at the moment they did this, which was 2018, but it sort of sets the stage of here's where we are. Before we know where we want to go, we really need to understand our current situation. So it took into account a lot of the past plans and studies I mentioned earlier. We did a large, public input has been, again, central to this process. So we compiled all the public input we've got. We did a lot of in-person outreach, but we also did online engagement. We did interviews, phone interviews. We did the online public question and answer session. We did these DIY kits, which I really love talking about. They're basically you do-it-yourself meetings where, if we can't meet with you, we'll send you a meeting kit, and you and your organization or group can meet at your own convenience. So we just ask that you drop it back off, and boom, there you go. You have a public input meeting in a box. And we also did postcard mailouts. We had also another great thing is our technical advisory committee, where we had a lot of different experts with different backgrounds inform our plan. We should point out that RDU was actually a member of that technical advisory committee and gave us a lot of good information on their future plans. But we had a lot of input from the development community, Wake Technical Community College, other neighborhoods, and so it was a really valuable input tool for this project. The section also goes into the specific demographics, the existing land uses, the housing stock, a lot of good information to sort of set the stage for this plan. Oh, any questions about this? Okay. So section 3, the vision and goals. This is pretty straightforward. The vision is really the overarching statement of where they want where the community wants to be in the future. If the land use plan is achieved, it's sort of a very broad, generalized statement. But then we do have more specific goals to help achieve that vision, and they are in the plan. We can go through those if you'd like, but basically to sort of set the direction, set the compass for where we want to head in this plan. And it also tees up the implementation items, which get real detailed at the very end of the plan. So you sort of have that traditional, and a lot of you learned this in school, where you have the big vision, and then you have the goals, and you have the objectives. So think of it that way. Implementation items is really another word for objectives. Any questions about that? All right, moving right along. So land use plan map. So this is sort of the iconic future land use map that most plans have. And so this is really mapping out where the community expects certain use to happen in the next 10 to 20 years. Again, not binding, but this is more of where we recommend or where we should guide development in terms of general use land use categories. And so each of those general land use categories has a detailed description of what those entail, all the preferred uses associated with those, and some key considerations for those uses. And I should point out that all the images, we're image heavy in this plan. We like to show images to really drive home certain points. And all the images used in this plan, every single one is from North Carolina. So you know that a lot of the things that we're proposing here can be done fairly easily. Any questions about that? All right. So section 5 is overall land use considerations. These are major land use issues that we all should consider when developing new policies as a town. These were really derived from a lot of the public input we did. These sort of rose to the top in the feedback that we got from the community. So we have development and regulatory considerations. We have community facilities and infrastructure considerations. So that includes things like roads and schools. We have environmental features and open space considerations, which includes things like loss of green space, loss of tree canopy. Image and identity considerations. So really, what we got feedback on is, Morrisville really needs a core, needs some sort of gathering place. It really needs its own unique identity, and how can we do that? And so we tackle that in this plan, and I'll quickly kind of break these down. So with the development and regulatory considerations, one big factor in our situation in Morrisville is that we're we're slowly, I don't know if I'd say running out of room to grow in terms of, at least horizontally, vacant land, underdeveloped land. And so we really need to think carefully about how we develop in the next 10 to 20 years. And so, and that's one of the reasons we were doing those sub-area plans, because we wanted to make sure that we got those right. Another big factor is that we're in close proximity to the Raleigh-Durham International Airport. And so want to make sure that we examine the latest data we have from them, ensure that we're compliant with guidelines put forward by the FAA, and ensure that our development is, can coexist with the existence of and expansion plans of the airport. Housing affordability and some preliminary steps to address that issue. So basically, we have this affordable housing plans. We kind of defer to in this plan to really go into the detail of affordable housing, but we do recommend that the town take initiative and take steps to work towards some of those goals in that plan. Unified Development Ordinance update. So of course, after this land use plan is adopted, there would likely be a lot of text amendments and updates to the UDO to sort of make sure that those two documents, land use plan and the UDO, correspond with each other. The next part of Section 5 is the development and regulatory consideration. Oh, wait, so this is the same section. So this is actually my favorite part of Section 5. So this is the general urban design principles that we list. And these are just kind of everyday basic urban design 101 applications that can be used in any town in the United States that really make strong, healthy communities. We have things like mixing compatible land uses, parking orientation to the side and rear of buildings, having buildings engage the street, better street connectivity, appropriate setbacks. So, no more over-prescribing setbacks, making sure that they're appropriate for that particular use. Open space preservation, screening and buffering, drive-through design. So maybe instead of having multiple lanes of drive-throughs wrap around a building, you have one, or you push the building up to the street. Utility area screening, building with versus against topography. So that's a tough one because it's hard to explain without some imagery. I can certainly pull that up later if you need to. But basically, working with terrain, building into slopes, not sort of shearing off slopes and retaining walls so that you're staring at a 20-foot retaining wall when you walk down the street, or a 20-foot pit when you're walking by the front of a building on a street. So just things to consider when you're developing land use policies. These are some tried and true urban design policies and principles that we think the town should consider. So community facilities and infrastructure. So this is really focusing on schools, transportation, utilities, just having concurrent infrastructure built when we have new development. Well, a major complaint we got from folks is, we're not necessarily opposed to growth in general, but we want to make sure that the growth is accompanied by adequate infrastructure, that our roads can keep up with the traffic that's being placed on the roadways, and that the schools aren't constantly capped as soon as we build a new school, or I guess not we, but Wake County builds another school. And what are some ways that we can address that? So the schools thing is a tough one because the town is fairly limited in what we can do in terms of building schools in Morrisville. I will say that we do work with the Wake County Public School System quite a bit, and we strongly urge them to build a school if they can, and we try to look for sites in Morrisville that we think may be viable for schools. The plan just calls for continued coordination with them to make sure that we are accommodating their needs, that our plan accommodates future school sites if they are interested in school sites, and just to have a continued dialogue with the school system. Another thing we were focusing on is integrating transit and pedestrian mobility into new development. So just ensuring that, as we're moving forward, that we're considering transit and pedestrian facilities and walkability when we develop new places, instead of just focusing on cars, sort of diversifying our modes of transportation, and how land use plays a factor in that. That's an important part of this plan. Maintaining a partnership with RTP and RDU. So RTP and RDU are big reasons for our success here in Morrisville. There's no denying it. So it's important that we continue to have a dialogue with both of those organizations. RTP has a lot of ambitious plans. They have especially it's interesting is their hub RTP plan where they were going to create sort of a mixed use transit-oriented development style project just north of us, and so that's exciting. What's good for RTP, what's successful for RTP only bodes well for Morrisville. So we just want to have a continued dialogue with those two major partners. Oops. I think it crashed. For 1 second. Give me a chance to catch my breath here. All right, so environmental features and open space considerations. So another major complaint we got from folks in the community is you're tearing down all the trees. Where are all the trees going? Why are you allowing so many developments to get rid of all our trees? So one thing I'll point out before I dive into this, there's certain types of development like single-family detached housing where the town has no authority to regulate tree clear cutting. But where we do call for conserving green space in ways that maintain the integrity of natural systems and wildlife corridors. So not just sort of superficial clumps of green space here or there that really don't serve a purpose other than just aesthetics. Really looking at areas where you can sort of bunch up natural preservation areas to maintain wildlife corridors, to maintain habitats. Usable green space is sort of what we're stressing here. We also heard a lot of folks mention that they want more park space in town. They want more park amenities, walking trails, and they'd like it to be within walking distance to their house. They'd like to be able to walk their dog to near dog park or disc golf park or whatever it is they want. They want some sort of recreational outlet within a 10 to 15 minute walk from their house. So that's something we have specified in this plan as well. I said it earlier, but maintaining a healthy and lush tree canopy, we're limited in some capacity with that, but where we do have clear cutting and we can regulate it, we ask that a lot of trees are replaced as best they can. I know it's tough with large surface lots to get the lush tree canopy that you had originally there with the original forest, but I think we can do a lot in terms of replacing enough trees to where you still have a lot of good green ambiance. And then, of course, monitoring the effects of development on local water bodies. So just mainly concerned with Crabtree Creek and other small streams in our community, ensuring that what we're building doesn't negatively impact our water quality. Lake Crabtree, of course, is just over the border, and so just keeping in mind that what we're proposing is not detrimental to that. So image and identity considerations. So another thing that we heard from folks is like, what is Morrisville? Like, what defines Morrisville separately from Cary, from Apex? What is our unique quality? And so, do we have unique characteristics that put us ahead in the region? And so, a lot of this revolves around, and as far as the land use plan is concerned, is placemaking. We really want to create unique, vibrant, walkable places where people can gather and hang out. And that's sort of uniquely identified as Morrisville. So when folks drive in, they cross the border from Cary and they see these new places, they go, oh, we're in Morrisville, this is unique to them. And it gives us something to be proud of, and overall it helps with our town brand that I know we've been real focused on. And another part of this is historic preservation, not just demolishing culturally significant homes, trying our best to preserve them and find ways for the private sector to preserve them or the public sector. Those are unique cultural elements that we should really strive to preserve whenever we can. Gateways are an important factor in this. So making sure that when, we have prominent gateways coming into town, so for instance, the causeway on Aviation or coming in from Davis Drive, having some sort of signature element, sign or whatever, and I know the town's already working on this, which is great. Just identifying that, hey, you're in Morrisville, this is a unique place, come hang out. And so that's kind of the impetus for a lot of these placemaking sub-area analyses too. We're looking at not just land use goals, but also creating a unique sense of place in Morrisville. Any questions about that? I know that was a mouthful. Okay, well, I'll just move right along then to section 6, and this is the prettiest section. This has all the sub-area plans and graphics. So just to summarize, again, I know those on the board have seen a lot of this, but for those at home, the TOD East is a component of an overall larger regional transit system plan. So the Triangle is currently looking at having either a regional commuter rail system or a bus rapid transit system. Go from approximately where Garner is all the way up towards Durham and RTP. And so Morrisville is right along either the BRT or the commuter rail line. And in fact, we're envisioned as being the airport stop for RDU. And so it's a critical stop along the system, as you would imagine. And especially with also folks heading up from Raleigh up to RTP. And so as such, we're looking at more of a transit-oriented development. So what that means is we're looking at vertically integrated mix of uses, highly walkable environment with building orientation to the sidewalk. So no parking in front of the buildings, hiding parking in general as much as we possibly can, just having an enhanced pedestrian experience as you're walking down the street. We're looking at a higher concentration of residential and office, and that's key, that's fundamental, I should say, and to support the viability of transit station. So ridership is critical, or residential and ridership and jobs all in one area is critical for the success of transit. We also look to have a seamless transition into Wake Technical Community College nearby. We think it's an amazing asset to have near this location, and we envision both projects working together closely. In that transitional zone, we're also looking at some green space as well, but we do have a larger central green space envisioned in this concept. Again, it's just a concept, but we think it would be great to have some sort of usable public open space in the middle of this project. Kind of give a break from the urban environment for a second. And then structured parking is strongly encouraged in this area. We aren't envisioning a lot of surface lot parking, although there'll likely be some. I know Go Triangle has been interested in some sort of commuter parking facility in this area. So we just want to make sure that that can be accommodated in some way, but in an aesthetically pleasing way that isn't disruptive to the urban fabric here. And it's not mentioned on here, but we do have this large McCrimmon overpass planned. And this is something that should be happening in the next few years. And this is envisioned to sort of bypass the existing at-grade connection near Sheetz gas station and cross over into what we had in the 2009 plan, which is TOD West, which is the other TOD side of the rail line. But one critical thing to note here is that we do envision the rail station or BRT station to be just north of this overpass, currently at least. And we do envision some sort of pedestrian infrastructure to carry people over from the east side to the west side of the development. So some sort of easy way to access both, either tunnel or bridge or whatever. We do envision some type of platform and pedestrian infrastructure there. McCrimmon Extension. So this is the large swath of land along the new McCrimmon Parkway that we just opened recently. So right now, currently, what we're seeing in this area is a lot of industrial development. There's a airport noise overlay zone that restricts a lot of sensitive uses like residential because of the proximity to the airport. And those based on, I'll get into that in a minute here, but those are originally based off of 1992 airline noise contours. So we've received new noise contours in 2014 that show a reduction in what is considered noxious in terms of airline noise or airplane noise by the FAA. And so it's a significant reduction. And so in light of that, we thought this would be a good opportunity to discuss, okay, well we have this new data that shows the airport's gotten a lot quieter. This is the standard that the FAA uses to recommend which uses are sensitive and which uses aren't, and which uses are compatible, et cetera. What do we do? Which direction do we go in this area? And so council felt very strongly that they wanted to sort of veer away from the status quo industrial flex type uses and get towards more of a diverse set of uses. And so we're looking at a sort of horizontally integrated mix of uses with some vertical integration limited. So when I say that, I mean vertical mixed-use integration is basically ground floor commercial with some type of use up top. Usually it's residential or office. But we're looking at mostly having that horizontally, at least in the way the plan's written right now. We're looking at a walkable environment, a building orientation of the sidewalk, so buildings engaging the street, not behind berms, not behind parking, but directly engaging the street so folks are more enticed to walk. We have a diverse array of uses. Single family is not recommended due to the airport proximity, so that was one of the gestures to better respond to some of the concerns raised by RDU, is that we voluntarily restricted recommending any kind of single family, detached or attached product in this area. So we're really sticking and talking about some multifamily, and we're looking at some possible ways to space out that multifamily so it's not all clustered along the roadway. We do have some mention of some possible park space and green space. We have since you've seen this rendering, we've added a couple of new development pockets here. We do have one that's sort of a mixed use, more vertically integrated mixed use built around a central dedicated green space. For those of you who are looking at the actual plan at home, feel free to zoom in on that. It's quite different from what we had last time, which was more of a conventional suburban garden apartment style development. We updated some of the buildings based on feedback from our town council mini retreat. They wanted to see some architectural variation in multifamily. We're not showing any building facades in these renderings because it would take forever to do, and I'm sure Nick appreciates us not doing that, but these are really for massing. But we did try to break up the massing, at least, of these multifamily buildings. We do have an example where we had one single building here. We broke it up into two. We went for more elevator-style apartments wrapped around a parking deck. We heard from our council that structured parking is sort of something they prefer in this area. Whether or not we require it or incentivize, we're still going to work that out later. But we just, in general, think it's a good thing for this area if it's feasible. And so we're showing more of that now. And so I think the difference here is we have a little more of a balance between uses. The residential has been consolidated a little more than last time. And so this really reflects some of the input we received from council at the October 10th mini retreat. In town center. So this is the last of the three sub areas. This is the core of the community. This is really near the historic crossroads where Morrisville was founded back in 1852. And so we really wanted to stay true to the kind of central location of where the original Morrisville was. It's not exactly where the original Morrisville started, but it's pretty close. We're really envisioning, similar to the TOD, but maybe on a smaller scale, we're looking at vertically integrated mix of uses. So primarily along Carolina Street, where we really want to see active ground floor uses, active commercial with residential on top, maybe some office on top, so that the pedestrian experience is good enough to entice someone to walk down the road. And so we also are looking at a large central park gathering space in this development. The one shown here is a little over an acre, I believe, but that can certainly be expanded. I know there was some talk whether or not we should have that building here and just expand that park. That's certainly a possibility. But again, this is all conceptual. This is fluid. It can change. And this is really just to give you an idea of the scale and massing of this project. But we also envision this space being used for special events. We want to make sure it's large enough to accommodate large town events, concerts, food truck rodeos, whatever it is. We think this would be a great spot for that. Structured parking, strongly encouraged. We do anticipate some limited surface parking in certain areas, but we really want to push for, in this plan, for structured parking. We had a work session with town council where we showed some visualizations. I'll show you here, of what it could look like with structured parking, what it could look like without, and how much development could be accommodated. And I don't have the A and B scenario here, but basically this picture on the right, we could toggle between scenario A and scenario B. Scenario A would be relying primarily on surface parking. scenario B would rely a lot on structured parking, and the difference is pretty stark in terms of the amount of development that you could get. And also, it's no matter what parking orientation this ends up as, we do strongly urge that the parking is screened, it's behind buildings, that the pedestrian is sort of the focus, that experience along the street, especially Carolina, is paramount and considered in future plans. We also won an award for this, by the way, for some of the work we did. Esri, the makers of GIS, gave us some international recognition for some of this work here, so that's something that we should be proud of. Okay, that was a lot. Again, sorry for being long-winded, but is there any questions before I get to the implementation stuff? Now, the implementation stuff is, there's some stuff in here that you haven't seen, like the action matrix. So if you have any questions about the sub-areas, let me know.
Brad, I think this might actually be a good point to kind of separate. So
Sure.
Let's do section 7 after we've discussed the previous sections.
That's great. Yeah, that's fine.
So I'm going to ask if any members have any comments or questions so far. If you would, I think Michelle, you're looking after the chat function.
I am. No one's commented yet, but feel free.
Okay. Well, I'm going to jump in then. On the town center, Brad.
Yes.
One of the notes you made to us about the revisions you've made was adding text about the transitional elements.
Correct.
And I wonder if you could sort of address that with respect to the public comment that we received this evening.
Yes, let me see if I can access that in the plan. Give me just a second. Yeah, so while I'm scrolling, we had some concern from folks, not only around the Jeremiah Street area, but also back near Church Street, that of the potential visual and environmental impacts, noise, et cetera, from this town center development. The concerns kind of varied between the visual, like you're going to have this large apartment building that I'm going to see from my yard. Also, there's concerns about roadways going right sort of perpendicular to the folks' residences, and we're concerned about headlights going through their living room, et cetera. So those are some tough design considerations that are going to have to be worked out with the actual development plan. Again, this is really more of a massing concept diagram here. But we do, and Nick, if you can hear me, I know we have specific text that talks about the importance of transitions from the actual town center plan. Here we go.
Yeah.
So mixed residential developments transition well into lower density surroundings, such as the Downing Glen neighborhood, by thoughtful architectural design and placement of buffers and landscaping. So basically what we're saying there, we had the most complaints from the Downing Glen subdivision in terms of just concern about the visual impact, but it really applies everywhere. There's some design solutions that you can implement to address a lot of that. You can either terrace buildings down when it interfaces with lower density areas. You can screen it with vegetation. You can alter the materials. You can break up the facade more. I mean, there's several ways you can address that. The road orientation issue, these are all conceptual roads. Have no idea what the actual roads will end up being. This is really to drive home the point that we want an interconnected street system. We want a grid system. And it needs to not dead end in abrupt, weird places. And so that's kind of what we're pushing for here. Where they actually intersect, totally, is yet to be determined. Nick, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
No, I mean, I think that captures the intent there in terms of how we would transition into the lower density residential units or residential homes to the north.
I think the difficulty is that the town center plan was way back in 2007, we had a very different town then, a lot fewer residents, and many of the subdivisions have grown up since then, so perspectives have changed. But I think there's a conflict between folks want to see what might happen because they're worried about it, versus it's only when you see something real being planned that you get a real sense of what's actually going to be like. And if I've learned anything being on the planning board for a few years, it's people are more worried about a situation where they don't have enough information. And I'll take an example was McCrimmon Corners. Folks in Breckenridge were really, really worried about what negative impact that would have on Breckenridge. Turns out now it's been developed, it's an absolutely wonderful asset for them. So I think our lesson is going forward, when the seeds of real plans are coming up for the town center area, we need to really make sure that we're reaching out to the folks who are in those historic structures at the very earliest opportunity to make sure we get their input and minimize the impact on those. Because one of the things we discovered in 2006, 2007, right under our noses, was the fact that Morrisville has a lot of history. And I did ask Michelle if she could include in this plan a reference to Appendix 2 from 2007, which actually lists the dozen or 15 or 16 historic buildings in Morrisville, so we don't lose sight of that. So that's kind of my concern about the town center. In terms of the McCrimmon extension area, that's obviously the biggest. I think it took most of your time in your discussion with council.
Correct.
Can you explain, where did the push for residential come from? Did it come from the council, or did it come from some of the owners?
So the overall, so just to back up again, so for those of you who don't know, the current zoning for the McCrimmon Extension area is mostly industrial. And that is mostly due to the fact that there's currently an airport noise overlay A, which was what we call, there's an A and a B. The A is more restrictive. It prohibits a lot of certain uses that are deemed sensitive to airplane noise. And so now that we've received new information in terms of a dramatic reduction in noise contours, specifically the 65 decibel noise contour, which the FAA is really what is focused on in terms of the cutoff between being compatible and then incompatible. We want to take a complete re-examination of this area. And so Howells Levine was asked to, we gave him sort of creative license on what is feasible for this area aside from industrial. And if we went in a different direction, if we stopped doing the status quo, what actually could happen here? And so they did some market reconnaissance and market analysis. Some feedback. And basically found that a wide variety of uses are feasible here, but that a lot of them are sort of interdependent on each other. Retail is obviously something we envision here, but you need you need enough rooftops to make that viable. You can have that served by some pass-by traffic on McCrimmon, but rooftops are sort of an essential component of a mixed-use development, even horizontal mixed use. It's good to also mix in employment. We're really trying to envision a place where you can work, live, go out to eat, shop, recreate. We have the weight competition center there. Even visit with the lodging here, all in the same area. With hopefully within walking distance of each other, all these uses. But if not within walking distance, a short drive. And so we're trying to diversify the uses, not have kind of the status quo of industrial and flex in this corridor. And really, I think council understands that they've made a major investment in this area in terms of infrastructure, and there's an expectation for this development to be of high caliber, quality, highly walkable mixed-use development. And so that's what this plan is trying to deliver in terms of what's prescribed here.
Thank you, Brad. Specifically, is vertical mixed use And structured parking, are they a requirement or a suggestion?
Suggestion at this point, yeah. So we heard a lot from council at our October 10th mini retreat that, and this is pretty much unanimous from everyone, that they wanted to encourage structured parking, at least encourage it. There was some talk about, whether we mandate it or not. We haven't, right now we're just recommending that it's encouraged at least. There's also some talk about vertically integrated mix of uses. The Grace Park development was brought up several times as a sort of the gold standard of mixed use, vertical mixed use development. So we got asked to, if you can make some adjustments to the concept plan, maybe look to Grace Park as an example of kind of the vertical mixed use that we're thinking of. So really focused on if there is multifamily near McCrimmon Parkway, that you consider some sort of ground floor commercial component. They didn't specify the amount. They didn't specify, how much of the block phase percentage or anything detailed like that. They just wanted to see how that could sort of be built out at a conceptual level. So it's hard to see here because we're not zoomed in. It's a small picture, but in the plan, if you zoom in, and the plans are pretty sharp, so you can zoom in pretty close. You can see some of the split between ground floor commercial, the residential, the office, et cetera. And we don't envision every building being vertically mixed use, but we think there's an opportunity for some of it.
Okay. And last question before I yield the floor to some other people. We heard a lot about the airport noise overlay district, and maybe later we'll get into actually the maps of those two districts, but are the two things tied together?
Yes, and it's further back in the plan or presentation, but yes, we believe that moving forward, if the plan were adopted as is, that when we come with the actual code language to implement this plan, that we really tie those two together. They're kind of hand in hand, and so that's staff's plan anyway. We'll see if council has a different perspective, but I believe from what we've heard at the October 10th meeting, they're on board with that as well.
Okay, thank you, Brad. I think Member Acharya wanted to make a comment or a question. Go ahead, Sanjay.
Thank you, Chairman. I wanted to echo your concerns around Downing Glen, right? Full disclosure, being a resident of Downing Glen, I can certainly see the concerns people have around the parking deck and the impact it is going to have on the residents there. Same can be said with the residents of Jeremiah Street. So we really ought to define how all of that will come together and be more explicit about it. So as and when you do this, or maybe as part of the plan, we need to clarify how that buffering is going to be addressed, if at all. Or you have to say this is just a, pictorial representation of the possibilities, and whether the parking deck will be there or not is something that will come down further, as the plan evolves. So that's something we need to talk about, right? So Brad, and the other part of the question I had on the town center was, we had talked about, potentially considering the development around the Pew House on the other side of Morrisville Carpenter. Yep. I haven't seen anything about that either mentioned in here. So is that basically no, and it is as is? That does not look, if you just leave it the way it is, it does not look as an integral part of town center. It just looks disjointed from the town center. So, you may want to reconsider that as well.
So I'm jumping ahead here because I wanted to save this till after this conversation, but you'll be happy to see that we added a very specific implementation item based on your comment of looking at, and there was, of course, agreement with your comment from the Planning and Zoning Board, and we think staff, we think it's a great idea to maybe perhaps do a development guide or small area plan for the area south of Morrisville Carpenter Road, or at least, around it and south of it, to analyze some of the historic assets there, and sort of, I remember you mentioning that, we should allow development there, but it really should highlight and sort of celebrate the existing assets there, and And we shouldn't be afraid to have development south of Morrisville Carpenter Road. So that's a very interesting planning challenge, I think, that we would love to tackle. And so that's why we added it as our 40th goal here. And we even put a midterm time horizon here. So we'd like to get this tackled in the near future. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yes, it does. Could you talk, in terms of that down in Glen situation, could you talk a little bit more about,
Sure.
Because I wasn't clear what you said to the chairman. Are we going to actually plant something out there? Because the buffers, given the amount of trees we have there, they don't really provide much buffers there right now. So
yeah, so we heard, and this is mainly at our online Q&A session that we did, one of those two, where we had some comments about, some concerns of folks that are sort of abutting this town center development about this apartment complex here. Again, this is conceptual, but we do envision some sort of multifamily development there. And so they were concerned about the interface between Down in Glen, the backs of their homes, and this town center project. We do, again, stress that there's some opaque greenery that you could put there. There's some stepping down, terracing of the buildings that may help. It's a challenge because the mixed-use development nature of this project relies heavily on residential. The site location was picked before I got here. This was sort of the committed area for the town center. One challenge that this site has, even though it's a lot of great developable land, the visibility for pass-by traffic isn't ideal. So there is not a ton of traffic that passes by, which is great for retail usually. You want a lot of eyeballs on storefronts. And there is some traffic on Town Hall Drive during normal non-COVID times. But if you looked at the data, the Town Hall Drive is extremely underutilized. It's a great roadway. It's very walkable. A lot of good things about it. But it's in terms of what retail is attracted to, it's fairly underutilized. So a key component of this plan is to have rooftops, residential units here to make retail viable. And any developer would confirm that without retail, mixed use is very difficult to pull off. And so our challenge moving forward when we actually issue an RFP for this project and we work with a real-life developer to build out the true downtown vision, which may resemble this and may be similar to this, but likely won't be exactly like this. We're going to have to address those concerns as best we can. We're going to have to keep the nearby residents informed of our plans. And we're going to have to defend these decisions that we make. And there's going to be some compromises. There's no doubt about it. Not everyone's going to be happy. I mean, we're essentially building a new downtown. And of course, it's not going to be perfect. And of course, not everyone's going to be happy. But I think we really need to strive to get as many people involved as we can and just address their concerns as best as we possibly can.
If I could just add to that briefly, a lot of those details, as Senior Planner West said, are going to be worked out with actual development proposals, with UDO code language that gets adopted later based on some of the recommendations in the plan. But I was going to touch on this kind of at the staff report section of the meeting, but we'll jump ahead. We're really excited. The RFP for the town center did go out. And so we are currently soliciting proposals for phase 1, which is that 6-acre portion kind of over by the library. And as we review those proposals, those are the types of things that we could be mindful of when we're working with an actual development team. But really excited that has gone out. Deadline for submitting, I think it's sometime in February. I can't remember the exact date.
Okay. Yeah, and my last comment is more about the intersection with Chapel Hill Road and Morrisville Carpenter Road. It's a railway intersection. And I don't know if we are ever going to build a overpass, underpass, whatever pass. But that is, that becomes a sore point in the town center as well. So maybe we need to have a plan around the challenges around that intersection, right? Is how is the traffic going to flow? Is the traffic is going to slow down with the additional traffic of the town center? How is all of that traffic going to be managed? So we need to think about that, if not in this land use plan, but definitely in the transportation plan around it.
I think you're absolutely right. That any infrastructure improvements at that or at that intersection, and especially if it's an overpass, would dramatically impact any kind of future development around that area. And so, as I mentioned earlier, we have an implementation item of doing a small area plan. I would wager that we would probably want to get some insight from NCDOT on their current plans for that intersection. I know I've seen a couple. We do have the latest one on our development services page, or the map services page, where we took CAD files and overlaid them on aerials to kind of show you the proposed right-of-ways and plans for that. But yeah, you're absolutely right. That's something we should consider if we do, in fact, do a small area plan or development guide for that section of town.
Yeah. Well, regardless of whether you do a small area plan or not, it is going to have an impact on the town center plan. Right? Either the town center is going to impact that intersection plan, or the other way around. So, because regardless of which way you look at it, right? If you don't have an overpass in that area, traffic is going to pile up, and we need to address that. If there is going to be an overpass or an underpass, that's going to mean, we need to come back and redesign some of the elements of the town center around it. So we can't, it's not one versus the other. Right? It has to, they have to go hand in hand in how we develop those piece parcels around it.
Thank you, Sanjay. Member Totoro, I think you had a question or a comment. Go ahead, Tim.
I think it's been answered, but just for confirmation, it looks like that this plan now would include the change to the airport overlay as contemplated, right?
Yes. Yeah. Correct.
Okay. So, one of the things that came to light in a lot of the sessions, and I think it was a great thing that you guys had so many open sessions to talk this through. But one of the things that came to light was that it's really not a viable place for schools within what's left of development within Morrisville. I think based on the amount of space that's needed, there's just the reality that there's nothing there, and with current schools capped, that change opens up, I believe, to additional residential opportunities. So, we're putting ourselves in a situation from resident one where we'll be in even bigger problem than we currently face. And, I wonder maybe if you could talk a little bit about, I know we're in dialogue with the schools, but beyond that, for something that is going to go so far into the future, how do we address this? It seems like a miss.
Yeah, well, so just to clarify, so our position as staff is that we're open to exploring literally any site in Morrisville for a school, so long as it meets the school system's needs and their future plans. So even in the McCrimmon Extension area, if there is a site that they're interested in, and we're, of course, if we roll back the airport noise overlay, we are fully compliant with FAA guidelines. We verified that very recently with the FAA. So schools would be fine with them in terms of what's allowed. Now, we do have noise attenuation standards that we would recommend, and we do recommend in this plan. But yeah, just continued dialogue, finding suitable locations, seeing if our code aligns with what they're trying to build. Is there any code tweaks that we could do on our end to make schools more viable in the community? Things like that are up for discussion, of course, and we're very flexible in how we work with them to find a location if they happen to be interested in a site.
And I guess that's the big point. The difference between them happen to be interested and we have a site. So really we're looking from day one being behind the eight ball on places for folks to go. And as we build, we're going to get deeper and deeper into this issue, really, unless we come up with something different.
I mean, and you know, of course, we always encourage the school system to think in innovative new ways that maybe they haven't thought of before. You know, consider going vertical and, you know, smaller footprint sites, you know, things like that that can sort of fit well into our rapidly growing area. And you know, I suspect they're going to have to rethink a lot of their site criteria in general as the triangle urbanizes. And obviously, we're fully on board with you know, meeting their needs as best we can. So yeah, just continued dialogue, partnership there is real important and something we talk about in the plan.
Okay, and just last question back to the airport piece. I understand, you know, the reduction of noise and how that's changed. I'm assuming this also has contemplated future growth in the area and, you know, how that's going to impact volume and flight volume. Yeah,
so I mentioned earlier we had a representative from RDU on our technical advisory committee, Ellis Caton. I think he's presented, maybe to you, but it definitely is presented to town council in the past. And he gave us some good insight about RDU's expansion plans, especially with the third runway plans they have in their overall future vision. And of course, their objection and concern for any kind of residential east of NC 54. And so to better address their concerns, we've peeled back some of the areas we were initially recommending for amendments. So we left a large section of Airport Overlay A intact in terms of the recommendation of this plan, at least, to better account for, and that's just for reference, that's near the former airport outlet mall, near the current Stitch project. Just in case that there's a shift in noise contours, in particular the 65 decibel noise contour from a new additional third runway. And for reference, that new additional third runway in their plans is envisioned sort of near the Briar Creek Reservoir, kind of north of their existing north runway. But we sort of rolled that back just in case. Right now, there's no 65 decibel, more or less, in town, according to the latest maps we've seen. So we're cleared in terms of FAA compatibility. But we thought it'd be a good gesture, just in case there is a shift, to maintain that restrictive overlay north of Transair Drive and Watkins Road. Now, the exact delineation that council ends up with, obviously that remains to be seen. We're comfortable with where it's at now. We do have some property owners, or at least one property owner near Transair Drive, that would wish to kind of further expand the new Airport Overlay B that we're supplanting A and we're replacing with B, essentially, I should say. And they're interested in maybe expanding B even more than we're recommending, but we're sort of cautious because we've been back and forth with RDU about this a lot. We feel we're in a pretty good place now, and so we're recommending that we move forward with it as envisioned, but of course that's certainly up for discussion.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Tim. I'm going to recognize member Josh Michael, then followed by Lee Langston. Josh, go ahead.
I actually didn't have a comment. I mean, I do have one, but I didn't type it in yet. But I can go ahead. I'd hate to jump ahead in front of somebody.
It's all right. You can so jump ahead.
Okay. Well, briefly, I guess my comment goes back to we had a public comment from John Reynolds. I think, Chairman Pritchard, you touched on this briefly with the historic district, kind of maintaining historic preservation. I know, I guess my question is, I know that Cary has a designated planner that deals with historic preservation in the town. Is there anyone on the Morrisville Planning Board that works for the town of Morrisville that deals specifically with historic preservation? Maybe that could give some confidence to the people that live in Morrisville that, you know, this is something that is being examined thoroughly. If you could speak to that.
Sure. So I'm essentially, I might let you mute first. Thanks. So I'm essentially the I guess, the historic preservation person in the planning department, the longest serving planner left in the planning department, I think, with 10 years. So I'm become the default historian. I would never replace Mr. Pritchard over here, but in terms of internally and town staff-wise, I primarily deal with the historic preservation issues, and especially in terms of maintaining our landmark status. We have 2 or 3 buildings with Wake County landmark status, I think 3 actually, and then a couple with National Historic Register status. A long time ago, and Chairperson Pritchard may know this, we attempted to have a historic district designation for Morrisville. Unfortunately, the State Historic Preservation Office did not feel that we had enough of inventory to warrant an entire district. One of the beautiful things about an historic preservation district is that you can create some pretty good regulations to protect and preserve historic buildings. You can also have design regulations for new buildings so that they're contextually compatible with their surroundings. So that's the one exception to the design controls bill that was passed a few years ago that strips all municipalities of sort of a lot of design considerations for single family housing. So things like garage orientation can be looked at, window placement, et cetera. All that can be regulated in a historic district. But we just didn't have enough of the inventory to warrant that. So the other approach we took is we did an inventory of properties that may have some historic value. I think Chairperson Pritchard mentioned that. It's in the Town Center 2007 Town Center Plan. There's also a map, a pretty good map that has a lot of building footprints of those historic structures and little call-out boxes of when those were built. It's pretty cool if you have some time to check that out. And some of those, unfortunately, have been demolished or just kind of falling into complete disrepair. But there are some opportunities for maybe some more homes on that list to be preserved. So we could certainly look at adding a reference to some of those properties. We might even add it right directly to the implementation action section, so it's loud and clear. So hopefully that answers your question.
It does. Thank you.
So, sorry, Ken, go ahead. My mistake. I didn't call you up first.
That's fine. No problem. Thanks. I have 2 questions about the TOD East sub-area plan.
Sure.
And the first one is regarding, obviously the rapid transit and rail corridor on 54 are major components of that plan, to cut costs for workforce housing and things of that nature. So my question is, are those done deals, those, the rapid transit and some sort of commuter rail line?
They are not done deals, but the financial planning, the modeling, the right-of-way planning for all those is underway. And if I had Ben Howell here, he would go into much more detail about their current situation. But right now, we're still in the planning stages, but we've, ever since we adopted the Wake County Transit Plan, we've been gearing up for getting more serious about this. We had an initial iteration of this years ago where we included light rail as a potential option, but the conversations shifted towards commuter rail and existing right-of-way and also the rail corridor there, and also bus rapid transit. So bus rapid transit, for those of you at home that don't know, it essentially operates and looks like a little, like a mini train, which is like a light rail on a fixed dedicated right-of-way, but it's a bus. It has rubber wheels and but it's sort of more sophisticated, has more elaborate stops, et cetera. So we're envisioning either both of those or at least 1 or 2, or either one locating on this corridor. So either way, no matter which system you go through, we're seeing this site as being critical. And again, Go Tropical has indicated that we are the airport stop. So, we would be the transfer for shuttle service or whatever, another bus rapid transit service, whatever they implement to the airport. And also not to mention, we're the last stop before you'd get to RTP. And you saw an image of what they're planning in RTP. It's pretty amazing. So, this would be a very important stop along the system. And this is why we're jumping ahead of this. We want to ensure that incompatible development doesn't happen here. We want to ensure that TOD is what happens here. We have no protections over this area currently, and so we want to ensure that any code that follows this, any new development happens, it abides by certain urban design rules, and gets us the critical mass of activity we need to make this transit station viable.
To expand on that just a little, obviously we don't have a crystal ball. Planning on both continues. There are monthly ongoing regional meetings to discuss the commuter rail, but I think that one's a little bit more complicated, a lot more involved. So, if I would anticipate that you'll see BRT before you would see the commuter rail.
I mean, my concern, it wasn't too long ago, a year and a half, when the Durham light rail busted. After they had acquired a lot of property, things of that nature. And I know that's Durham. It was rapid transit as opposed to like a commuter rail. I just get nervous with that type of stuff. The other question I have is, you mentioned that the airport noise overlay district would have to be amended for the TOD East sub-area plan. What type of amendment would that require?
So yeah, you're correct that both the McCrimmon extension plan envisioned in this plan and also the TOD that you're looking at right now cannot happen unless the airport overlay is amended. And so I want to underline the word amended because we are not recommending that it goes away. We're simply recommending that it be supplanted with what we currently have, which is Airport Overlay B in our UDO, which allows for certain uses like residential, and I think it even allows for schools, but they have to have some noise attenuation measures implemented. And so we're simply asking that the area delineated in the plan, and I forget which page it is, but I can go to it if you'd like, be amended to Airport Overlay B. And that we also ask that we maintain Airport Overlay A section near the former outlet mall to account in case for any expansion plans from RDU in terms of a third runway. And also we are asking that single family development, both detached and attached, is still restricted in east of NC 54, at least in the amended Airport Overlay District. We understand that it's somewhat difficult to do noise attenuation for single-family homes, more so than the multifamily buildings. They're large structures. You can wrap them easier. It's cheaper. But also, we don't even know if we have the legal authority to require that for single-family homes, given some recent legislation from the state. So to be safe and to better address the concerns from RDU, we've decided to back off of from single-family.
Thank you.
Lee, go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman Pritchard. So a lot of my stuff has been gradually whittled away here. Back to the airport thing, I like the two maps that you showed in the slideshow tonight. It would be great if that had made it into the report because it's a pretty clear delineation and, evidence to go against what RDU is basically being Pollyanna here about how we should be controlled by something that was done in 1990 and we should never change that. It seems pretty clear that there's less noise and that's pretty good proof. So, that would have been great to made it into the actual land use plan. But yeah, I certainly don't. I think you're being pretty thoughtful about what you're doing here, and it's not some willy-nilly, wild, wild west, letting people build everything they want to build in these areas like RDU is kind of making it out to be. But I understand their point. They want to try to control everything around the airport. But, we need to take into consideration what's best for the whole town of Morrisville, what's best for the landowners here, and try to balance that and not just, do what RDU wants. We're not RDU. So, but yeah, like I said, it's a good, I love those two comparisons there. And then as far as the school thing goes, it's sort of the same thing. We are not the Wake County school system. It is not our responsibility to build schools or even save land for schools. So, while it's great to work with them, I don't want us to be hamstrung by blocking off every single section of town that might possibly ever have a school in it if the school system is not going to come forward and go ahead and do something about it. I mean, that is their job. Our job is to work with the town and try to do what we can with the town. And the school system's job is to take care of the schools that need to get built. And to think that somehow crowded and capped schools is new is not correct. I was born here, and since I am old enough to remember, schools have been overcrowded. So if they haven't got it right in the last 45 or so years, they're probably not going to suddenly start planning ahead more now because they're still constrained by budget and every other concern. So I think it sounds like the staff has done a good job working with them and working with RTP to try to get, like with Parkside and everything else. And I just keep doing that. But I just don't see reserving every plot of land in the town as very viable. So sounds about it. Everything else has been answered.
Okay. Thank you, Lee. Chris, I've sort of attempted to ignore you because you're so close on the left-hand side. Do you have any comments or questions?
Well, I think it looks great. I just can see the evolution of all the work that's been into it, and I think a lot of the questions will be fleshed out when the designs come in. So I think next step from our standpoint might be around any standards, requirements, any types of changes to address this new growth plan. But I think it's just phenomenal.
Thank you.
And Sanjay, I think you wanted to come back. Sanjay?
No, I just had a comment, basically, right? We keep on saying that we are working with the county school system to perhaps build a school. Well, perhaps we should also consider looking at the other neighbor, RTP, and maybe work with them to potentially, either find space for us or it will be to mutual advantage, right? As RTP is trying to get into building homes along with residential, along with businesses, they are also going to run into the same thing. So perhaps some kind of communication with maybe Durham schools, maybe go into charter schools. I don't know. We have to find ways to meet the school needs. Right? I know I heard Lee's comment around it's a Wake County school system's role, but at the end of the day, planning cannot be done in isolation. Right? We talk about infrastructure for supporting residents. School is part of infrastructure. I know the legislature in the state don't think about it that way, but they ought to. So just because the legislatures have shrug off their responsibility doesn't mean we should. We have to at least keep talking about it and thinking about other ways to address that.
Okay. Brad, we sort of stopped there and we were going to go through the implementation. Do you need a break or?
No, I'm good. We'll just charge right ahead in here. So
Okay. We'll charge on then to the implementation section.
Okay, so yes, so section 7 is our implementation section, and this is sort of new. We did have some text and placeholders in the implementation section last time. Of course, we wanted to get final input on those before we published them. We mentioned earlier we had 5 work sessions with our town council to make sure that what we were including reflected their viewpoints and direction. And so the implementation section is really designed to show you how the land use plan should be utilized. It's really a set of guidelines. It's sort of a compass to help you direct policy and land use decisions moving forward over the next 10, maybe 20 years. It also outlines some partnerships that you just really want to make sure the town maintains. We mentioned a couple of them, but it's important that we work with our neighbors, other agency folks to achieve this vision, the land use plan. A lot of it isn't possible without these partnerships, so it's very important that we continue to have a dialogue with them. Of course, continuing public involvement in the land use policy decision. So this isn't something that we adopt and we put on a shelf and it's static. This is something that evolves. This is something that will constantly be referenced. Anytime we have a rezoning or land use decision, we were going to have the land use plan as reference for that. And so we always want the public to better understand this plan. If there's an opportunity for staff to better clarify elements of this plan, of course, we're open to that. Our door's open to any public outreach there. And it's important to update this. As as new challenges change or emerge, or as new technologies come online, there's going to be new opportunities, new major employers announced, whatever the case is, and we're going to have to pivot. And this land use plan is designed to do that. And we can certainly amend or, if not add small area plans or whatever the case is to supplement this plan, much like we did with the 2009 plan. So that's something certainly on the radar and something we need to keep in mind moving ahead. And of course, one of the most important elements is the actual implementation of this plan. Seeing progress. A lot of this is sort of big picture thinking stuff, so it's hard to get measurable, easy to read metrics that are applied to other professions and other documents. But really, you need to just look for progress and seeing the preferred trends that you envisioned in this plan. And are you seeing the housing trends that you're aiming for? Are you seeing the mix of uses that you're aiming for? Is the area that you said is going to be walkable? Is it walkable? Are the buildings designed the way it's described in the plan? These are all things that you just need to look for in the future. And so the most to-the-point detailed version of this is the implementation action matrix. And so these are the sort of, you saw the vision, you have the goals, and then now we're in the objectives. This is the thing that I think everyone should pay attention to. These are the actual items that we as staff and as a town and other agencies we're partnering with will actually try to accomplish over the next few years, and even longer in some cases, moving forward after this plan's adopted. And like I said earlier, there's 40 of these. I'm happy to go through each and every one of those. It may take a while, but certainly can do that. Or, since many of you, I'm sure, have read the plan cover to cover, you can point out some implementation items that you have questions about or need clarification on. Happy to do that as well. So I'll leave it up to the chair to decide or get some consensus on the direction we go there.
Much as I'd enjoy going through every single one in fine detail, I think some others may not. I'm going to jump in with a big one,
sure,
which is actually number 18.
18, right. Yes.
And it's also on page 83 of the plan. It's the whole column to the right, which talks about an implementation action committee.
Correct, yes. And I figured you all would have a question about this, so I'm ready.
And the overall plan, there's still some details that I would disagree with. But I think now is the time to sort of close ranks. The council has kind of spoken. So this plan is our plan. It's the town's plan, and specifically it's the Planning and Zoning Board's plan. And it seemed to me that the Implementation Action Committee ought to be and should be the Planning and Zoning Board.
And we don't necessarily disagree with that. And I think the wording House Levine chose to use was to be as broad and generalized as humanly possible for this plan in case there was some unique political situation here where there's a new board set up or whatever the case is. But we certainly could see the Planning and Zoning Board, fill that role. The Planning and Zoning Board has a lot of the background knowledge of planning and principles, urban design principles, things that are extremely useful in implementing this plan. And I feel from the staff's perspective, we'd be perfectly happy with that. So, of course, and we'll even repeat that to town council when they probably have a similar question.
Thank you. I think my other details we can probably do offline. There was something that did catch my eye, number 39. Is this how we're going to take over the town of Cary?
This is our Pearl Harbor announcement here. Now, so we are exploring the possibility. So I don't know if you've noticed, I'm sure many of you have, our border with Cary is quite a mess. It zigzags in and out. In fact, it goes kind of in the middle of a right-of-way of some roads, and it even zigzags in those right-of-ways of roads. And so it's annoying as someone who makes a lot of maps and GIS and has to map this stuff, but it's also a problem for first responders. And, for an instance where you have a crash that initially starts on one side of the border, they spin out into Cary's jurisdiction, for instance, and then the first responder has to figure out, who's responding. The emergency operations center, or the call center, I'm sorry, is sitting there scratching their head, looking at a map, going, okay, I think this is a Cary call, but it actually did occur in Morrisville. So there's some definitely some incentive to fix that. It's very early on in preliminary discussions with town of Cary staff. Obviously, it hasn't gone to a council level, but we are looking at that as a possible sort of midterm project within the next couple of years or so, ideally, to address some of that. Nothing, no major shifts we foresee, but just kind of straightening out that border. We'll determine if parcels are swapped or not, or if it's just more right-of-way focused, whatever the case is. We'd like it to be parcel swapped, to be honest. I mean, there's some bizarre things that have happened. I think a lot of it was a result of kind of the annexation competition back in the 90s to grab as much land as you could. We have a much better relationship with town of Cary these days, and they're one of the partners we mentioned strong partnerships. They're definitely a partner we want to continue to work with, and so that's sort of the background on that item.
Okay, thank you, Brad.
Yep.
Sanjay, I think you had a question or a comment.
Yeah, a question is, could you define what is the time horizon associated with short, long, and mid?
Yeah. So
are you talking about 6 months, 1 year, whatever?
Yeah, so I'm circling it right now, if you can see it on your screen. So short term is what we expect to take less than 2 years. Midterm is more 2 to 5 years, and long term is more than 5 years. And these are just estimates based on experience. They may be faster, they may be slower.
Okay.
General terms.
So those are time to completion, right? Not the time to start this activity.
So I think we're envisioning mostly that these would be implemented within that time frame. So if you see a let's see, like a finished restoration of the Pew House and repurpose it for public or private use, I feel like that's something we could probably accomplish in 5 years. I mean, it's a matter of resource allocation, but do we build a park in front of it? Do we restore the train depot? Those are other things you can throw in there too. But if you're just focused on, finding a purpose for the Pew House, I mean, that's something that's midterm. Short-term example, coordinating with major employers in Morrisville and neighboring communities to survey employees on preferred housing types and options that may attract them to Morrisville. So we actually had a good amount of dialogue with our former Chamber of Commerce president, Sarah Gaskell, who said that a big recruiting tool is housing close to the workplace, quality housing close to the workplace. And in many cases, if you could walk there, it's even better. And so, maybe we get some more insight from employers on specifically what their employees are wanting and some of the amenities aside from housing that they're looking for. Do they want places to hang out too, which I suspect they do. Do they support our effort for placemaking and gathering places and walkable communities? These are all things that we're seeing other cities build out to attract major employers. That's something that maybe Morrisville should consider doing as well. So, but that could happen tomorrow. We could start calling people and then finding out what their concerns and desires are. So, long term, memory escapes me. What's long term here?
You had the Central Park.
So we have a incorporated community center into the future town center development. So there's been a lot of discussion about having some sort of civic anchor, civic anchor in the town center. We don't know what that's going to look like. I think right now we're looking at some sort of wetlands interpretive community meeting space in the very back of the project, near the creek back there, past Church Street. But that could also mean, a community center closer into the heart of the project area. So that's a major expense and a major allocation of resources. And so we put long term for that because the town center build out is obviously at least a 10-year project. And so that obviously qualifies for a long-term commitment.
Okay. I would suggest, I didn't see any reference to working with the school systems about schools and those things. I know it's an ongoing activity, but it would be prudent on our part to include that, right? So that at least people who read the plan are aware that it's not something that you are not doing. It's part of something that is ongoing activity, and we need to continue doing that.
That's number 19.
Yeah. So we actually, good news that we do have that. And we do have it as ongoing. So
I would say it specifically says Wake County Public School System, right? I would broaden it up and say public school systems in general, right? Because Durham is not far away from us. Why are we just stuck with Wake? We can use Durham. We can perhaps go with RTP and find out what they can do for us, right? So I'm basically saying don't pigeonhole us into just one school system.
yeah, I mean, well, we only put Wake County Public School System because that's the jurisdiction that we fall under in terms of, well, most of it, our town falls under in terms of school systems. But yeah, I mean, if council wants us to keep this more vague, we can certainly do that. I will say that for the folks that we've talked to in the public, they are adamant usually that we specifically call out Wake County Public Schools and not muddle the point at all. So that's just something I'll throw out there.
Yeah. Understand.
Is there anybody else who'd like to make a comment? Wow. So, thank you, Brad, and thank you, Nick. I'm sorry we didn't acknowledge you formally. Thank you for being on standby there.
Okay. Thank you.
So,
yeah, so I guess the only thing we have left is, again, we can go line item by line item with the draft plan revisions made. I think you got that in advance of the meeting. Happy to not go line item by line item and just answer the questions you have about specific items. Either or.
I have that list in front of me, and I think we tackled just about every single one.
Great.
Great.
So, again, I would reiterate that if we pass this along and it gets approved, it is our plan, both as residents of Morrisville and also as Planning and Zoning Board members. So does anybody want to jump in and make a motion? Lee, go ahead.
I had to make sure I was off of mute. I hereby move to recommend approval of Resolution 2020-380-0 of the Morrisville Town Council pertaining to the adoption of the Morrisville Land Use Plan.
I have a second for that motion. Member Sack. Ken, would you like to go ahead? I think Ken is seconding that
Second the motion.
Thank you.
No, that's fine. I second the motion.
Thank you, Ken. So we'll do the roll call vote, please, Marty.
Member Toterai?
Nay.
Member Sack?
Yay.
Member Acharya?
Yeah.
Vice Chairman Langston?
Aye.
Chairman Pritchard?
Aye.
So the motion passed 4-1
Thank you.
in favor of the approval of the land use plan.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. Tim, if I may, would you like to just make a quick comment as to why you were a nay vote?
Sure, happy to. First, I think they did a fantastic job of pulling this stuff together and reaching out to the community. I think all of that was phenomenal. The reason I voted in the negative is we heard a lot about how it's not our responsibility for roads and for schools, and I think that's true in a lot of ways. But keep in mind that I might not be responsible for driving the car, but if it crashes, I get hurt. And I think that we really need to think a little bit deeper about the impact of some of the implications of the plan and how it affects all constituents, including those around the airport and within schools.
Okay. Thank you, Tim.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, historical Brad, thank you for your presentation.
I will never take your place, but I'm a good apprentice.
So we're going to move on to item 10 of our agenda, which is staff comments.
Brad, would you mind scrolling to the newsletter?
Yeah.
Sorry, going to make you stand a little bit longer.
I forgot.
It should be at the bottom of the combined PDF. It should be at the bottom of the combined PDF after the PowerPoint.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. Oh, I need my eyes checked. I can't see it. Oh, share the screen, please.
I think it's being shared right now. I see the red.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, they see it.
Yeah, it's not for some reason. Okay, well, I do need to get my eyes checked, but I'll try and. Didn't have any new development applications or administrative approvals come in November. In terms of town council approvals, there were multiple rezonings approved last month. That was the old Sam's Club building, the former Outlet Mall, and then also the rezoning for the Crabtree Nature Park area. So all of those passed and were approved by town council. And once again, under other news, we're just really excited that RFP for the town center went out. That's a big step for the town, and really looking forward to seeing those proposals come in and move that project forward. Also wanted to mention a couple, I think just two other things. You did get from Aaron Hudson a copy of the updated advisory board and committee policy. I think I already got at least one of those acknowledgement forms back from one board member. But just a reminder, please look that over and get that acknowledgement form in. And then we have started work on one of the other kind of text amendments in the list of text amendments that staff is working on, and that is the updates to the access and circulation section of the code. In particular, that's going to get into some TIA issues, some issues with cross-access, some issues with how to deal with kind of transportation and access with existing development, maybe a little bit better. Stakeholder engagement on that one kicks off next week. So long-range planning manager Ben Howell is going to be hosting a live Q&A next Thursday, December 17th from 4 to 5:30 on that. And then sometime early next year, you'll probably see those amendments coming forward. But we're going to kick off January with some rezonings, and then pretty heavy into some text amendments probably after that. But I want to wish everyone just a happy holiday. Don't even know what to say about 2020, but I hope everyone enjoys your holiday in whatever form that has taken for you this year.
Thank you, Michelle. Are there any staff announcements?
We did have on November 30th, so just very recently, a new planner to start, Aaron Pritchard. So he is on board. Excited for that. And we had a couple other vacant positions with individuals who should be starting end of this year, mid next year.
That's great. And I was interested in the last name, and I don't think there's any kind of relation that I'm aware of. I'm glad you didn't exclude him on the basis of name. That's good. Thank you, Michelle. So member comments. Let's start with Lee. Any comments for the team?
Sorry, I didn't know I was muted again. Just say thanks for all the work on the plan. It looks great, and happy holidays, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, Lee. Tim, any comments?
Yeah, echo the thank you, especially for making all of this virtual work well. It's been really super helpful, so appreciate that.
Very good. Sanjay.
I echo Lee and Tim's comments. Thank you very much for all your hard work, and enjoy your holidays and be safe.
Thank you, Sanjay. Chris.
No comments. Happy holidays.
Very good. Josh.
No comments. Great. Other than happy holidays as well.
Thank you, Josh. Ken.
Yeah, just I thought the land use plan went well. Tonight's presentation was really great. Happy holidays to everybody, and just thank the staff for all they do and helping us look good.
Thank you. Good. And I would like to echo all those comments and wish everybody a very happy and safe holiday. So I guess we need a motion to adjourn. Anybody like to make that motion?
I move to adjourn.
Thank you, Ken. Do I have a second?
Second the motion.
Okay. So I have a motion and a second, seconded by Sanjay. Roll call vote, please, Marty.
All right. Member Toterai.
Aye.
Member Sack.
Aye.
Member Acharya.
Aye.
Vice Chairman Langston.
Aye.
Chairman Pritchard.
Aye.
The motion to adjourn is approved.
Thank you. We are adjourned.